Yo guys, how's it going? In this video we're going to take a look at some smooth sounding extended chords that will sound great for playing neo soul. Now, this is actually the second part in a multi-part series on this style. So if you haven't seen the first part on beginner neo soul chords, then be sure to check that out. The link is right up here. And as always, if you want to see all of the chords in a single source, then I've created a PDF which is available on my Patreon page in the link below. Anyways, let's go on to looking at the chords. So in this segment, we're going to take a look at some chords in the key of G based off the lowest two strings. And we're going to start by building some major scales, eventually harmonizing them with our chord shapes. So let's start by building a major scale on the low E string. Now, we're going to take each note of the scale and harmonize it with a different chord sound. For our first chord then, we have a G6-9 chord. And the reason I've chosen this one is that this is a good chord for doing little fills with your free fingers. So basically the first finger here is going to bar the second fret, which is going to allow your pinky to be free, and you can use that to do little hammer-ons and pull-ups. For the next chord, we've got a minor 11 sound, just a nice chill A minor 11 chord here. For the third chord of the key, we have a B minor 11 sound, exact same shape as the one I just played. And then for our fourth chord in the key, we're going to look at a C6-9 chord. So again, with this sound, it's exactly the same as the first one. And you can do the same little fills and stuff with this chord as well, since it's exactly the same as the first shape. And your pinky is free. For the 5 chord of the key, we've got our dominant sound. And in this case, we've got a nice D13 chord. Now the role of the dominant chord is to create tension, which will push towards resolution. So if I play this sound here, and then I resolve it with like a G major 7 chord, that's going to be a really nice cadence. So anyways, 5 chord of the key, we've got a dominant 13. Now for the 6th chord of the key, we're going to play another minor 11 sound here. And then finally for the 7th chord of the key, a little bit of a tricky one, but we've got an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, pretty standard. And then we are back to the first chord again. So this G6-9 sound. Now, let's move on to taking a look at some chords that are based off the A string. So let's start by building a major scale on the A string here. So we have a G on the 10th fret, and we're going to descend like this. And then we're actually going to go back up here. Instead of playing the 2 as an open note, we're going to play it on the 12th fret, and then we'll go back to the root. So in this case, we're going to look at some different sounds here, some more kind of 9th based chords. So our first one is a G major 9 sound. And then our 7th chord is an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. This is a great sound for this style here, since like these chords are really jazzy. This major 9 chord that we just looked at is also really good because you can do that that bar, and then this sound here has just kind of got this nice kind of vibe for this style. Our next chord is an E minor 9 sound. So again, you can create these little elaborations around the sound here by doing some creative barring. So be sure to check that one out. And with these minor 9 chords in neo soul, you'll hear a lot of what's called parallelism. So you might hear something like this chord just moving around kind of without any sense of key, just like that. So you can kind of take the shape and just kind of move it around the guitar here. It won't be in a particular key, but you'll get some interesting sounds if you just play around with this color. Anyways, going back to the key of G specifically, for our 5 chord, we have a D9 chord, and we'll talk about this one a little bit more later. And for our 4 chord, we have C major 9. So again, you can do a little bar with the first finger here, and then do some hammer-ons with your pinky, kind of going, I guess, in between a 6-9 and a major 9 chord. And then we have a B minor 7 chord. And then once again, we have A minor 9, and then finally, G major 9. So those are the chords on the A string. Now in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about dominant chords and some cool tricks that you can do with them. Okay, so let's talk about dominant chords. Dominant chords are an important chord in neo-soul, as you hear them quite a lot, and the difference between some of the math rock stuff that we normally talk about on this channel and this stuff is that the dominant chord has a much greater role. So anyways, the dominant chord's function in music is to create tension to push towards resolution. And the cool thing about the dominant chord is that it's a very flexible sound. So if we take a look at this dominant shape here, it's a really unstable chord which is formed on the basis of this tritone right here. And the cool thing about this sound is that you can add extra notes to it to create these really funky extensions. So if we take a look at the dominant 9 chord built on the A string that we looked at in the last segment here, we can actually change this 9 to either a sharp 9 or a flat 9, which is going to create a very tense sound. So let's break down the chord note by note, and then I'll show you how you can go about changing this chord into something else. So we have, starting on the lowest note here, D, we have the root, then we have the third, then we have the seventh, then we have the ninth here, which is on the B string. So if I take this ninth and simply raise it a semitone, we're going to get a sharp 9 interval, aka the Jimi Hendrix chord. If we lower it a semitone again, we just have a regular 9, and if we lower it a semitone, we have a flat 9. So these are all really unstable sounds here that really want to push towards resolution. So the way that you would use these kind of insane tensions here, I think, is through some nice voice leading. So let's say that we play this flat 9 chord here. So basically the upper note of the chord is kind of the note that will stick out to your ear as kind of a melody note. So this note here. So if I'm going to use this, then I want to lead it into the tone or into a tone in my next chord. So my next chord is going to be a G chord. So I want to try and walk this note either down or up into a note that's going to be in a G chord. So if I just look at a G chord like this, we have this note, which is right here. So we'll have this nice semitone resolution where we walk up to that sound. So if I play this flat 9 chord, and then I go into this like G bar chord, we have this really nice sense of like, whew, that sound is resolved. Now we could do something a little jazzier, and we could resolve to a major 7 shape. Again, that semitone relationship is still standing, and that's how that's going to work. So when it comes to something like the flat 9, we want to use that in a similar context where the melody note in that chord is sticking out really well. So here's an example progression, actually, using the sharp 9. So this is going to be in the key of F, and it's also going to use a little trick about dominant chords that I'll tell you about in a second here. So it's going to sound like this. So we have F major 7, and then we have E 7 sharp 9, and then we have A minor 7, and we're going to go G7, C7, and then back to F. So in this case, this sharp 9 chord here sounds really good after this major 9 chord, because the upper note of the major 9 chord and the upper note of the sharp 9 chord are exactly the same. So you have this nice kind of consistent pivot point here. And this is something that I've talked about in my video on common tones. So if you haven't seen that one, that's right up here. But basically, when chords share the same, or when chords share similar pitches, or I should say when they share the same pitches, that's a way to create some really smooth sounds between two chords that are not traditionally linked together. So in this case, if we're in the key of F, you also might have noticed that an E7 is not in the key. So a little trick that's happening here is called a secondary dominant function. And the general idea of a secondary dominant is that any chord in any key can be preceded by its own dominant. And the reason that you would do this is to create an extra sense of emphasis on a preceding chord. So in this case, this E7 sharp 9 chord is actually the 5 chord of this A minor 7 chord. So this idea that every chord can be preceded by its own dominant simply means that you take a chord that you're targeting, in this case A, and you find a chord that is 5 steps away, or a fifth away. So if I go A, B, C, D, E, right, I have A to E, so that's the fifth here. So the fifth of A would be an E7. So normally in the key of F, it would be a E minor 7 flat 5, but I can just change that chord to a dominant chord if I want to temporarily make A hit a little harder. So that's the secondary dominant. So this progression is actually going 1, and then what we'd call this 5/7 of 3, since it's the dominant of the 3 chord. And then we go to this G7 chord here. Now in the key of F, G is typically a minor chord, but again, this G7 chord here is meant to push us towards the C chord, since it's the 5 of C. So this would be the 5/7 of 5. That's what we call that. So it's C's dominant. And then we go to C7 right here. Now the crazy thing about this is that this chord is the dominant of the 1 chord. If we go from F, F, G, A, B, C, right? That's 5. And so in this case, this is actually the true dominant in the key of F here. And then it pushes us back to 1. So anyways, the idea of the secondary dominant, again, is that any chord can be preceded by its own dominant. And when we do this, it creates this temporary sense of oomph when we push from one chord to the next. So once again, this progression goes 1, and then it goes to the dominant of the 3 chord, which is A minor. And then we go A minor, and then we go to the dominant of the 5 chord in the key. So this is G7 going to C7, and then the C7 goes all the way up to 1 again. And here's another trick that you can also try. So if we take a look at these dominant chords here, just standard dominant chord voicing, if we want that flat 9 sound, which is really common in neo soul, you probably hear it as something like this. As a diminished chord, all we need to do is take our dominant chord shapes and just get rid of the root and play the note that's a semitone above the root. And so when I do this, I have a C7 with a flat 9, but there is no root attached to it. And when we take the notes of this C7 flat 9, we get rid of the root, we actually create what's called a diminished chord, which is a crazy chord that basically is made of all minor thirds. It's totally what you'd call symmetrical, which means that you can move this shape in minor thirds all the way up the neck, and it will sound exactly the same. But basically, if you just take your dominant chord shapes and you just get rid of the root or move the root up a semitone, you'll create a diminished chord. And if you move that diminished chord up in minor thirds, you'll get the exact same sound. So you can use that to create some even spicier sounds in the vein of neo soul. So anyways, have fun playing around with these crazy dominants. Remember to use them melodically. That will help more than just trying to plug them in. And yeah, that should get you on your way to some spicy neo soul sounds. So hope you like this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.